My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 34 years old. For most of my life, I believed being a good daughter meant showing up no matter what. Showing up when people needed money. Showing up when people needed favors. Showing up when people didn't deserve it. I believed family loyalty was measured by sacrifice. I was wrong. The moment I finally understood that happened at my parents' dining table. 1 second. My 9-year-old daughter Lily was sitting in her chair smiling at something her cousin had done. The next second, she was on the floor. My father shoved her. Not hard enough to hurt her physically. Hard enough to hurt her in every other way. He didn't hesitate. Didn't apologize. Didn't even look down. He simply lowered himself into the chair she'd been sitting in and said coldly, "That seat is for my real grandchild." For a moment, the entire room froze. The baby in the bassinet beside my sister made a small sound. Silverware stopped moving. The air itself seemed to stop. My mother took a sip of wine. My younger sister Madison stared at her plate. Her husband quickly picked up their baby and looked away. No one said a word. Not one person. Lily slowly pushed herself off the floor. What broke me wasn't that she looked hurt. It was that she looked embarrassed. Like she thought she'd done something wrong. Like she believed she shouldn't have been sitting there in the first place. I looked at my father. A man I had spent years helping. A man whose bills I paid. A man whose mortgage I helped cover. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I didn't make a scene. I simply said 5 words. "You're done. Mortgage help is over." The wine glass slipped from his hand immediately. It shattered against his plate. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Madison's eyes widened. And for the first time all evening, my father looked frightened. Because unlike everyone else in that room, he understood exactly what those 5 words meant. 6 years earlier, when the economy hit them hard and they fell behind on payments, I stepped in, quietly, without conditions, without recognition. Month after month, year after year, half the mortgage, sometimes groceries, sometimes utilities, sometimes repairs. Whenever something broke, somehow I was expected to fix it. My father never thanked me. Not once. My mother acted as if it was my duty. As if raising me had created a lifetime debt I could never repay. Still, every Sunday I showed up. I brought Lily. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled. And all the while they treated my daughter like she was less. Because Lily was born before I married her father. Because her father abandoned us when she was still a baby. Because she wasn't the perfect grandchild they wanted to show off. I took Lily's coat, picked up my purse, and left. My mother called my name as we walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. They already knew what was coming. That night, Lily climbed into my bed around 2 in the morning. She was holding the stuffed dog she'd had since kindergarten. The same one she slept with whenever she felt scared. She didn't say anything. She just curled against me. I could practically hear the questions spinning through her mind. Why did Grandpa say that? Why doesn't he love me? What did I do wrong? I wrapped my arms around her. "You didn't do anything wrong," I whispered. "Some people don't deserve to be grandparents." She nodded against my shoulder. But I knew the damage had already been done. The next morning I made a decision. I wasn't going back. 3 days later, someone knocked on my front door. When I opened it, my mother was standing there. She looked awful. Mascara smeared. Hands shaking. Eyes swollen. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then, I remembered Lily's face on the floor. My mother stepped inside. She didn't ask how Lily was. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention what happened at dinner. Instead, she burst into tears. "The bank is coming after the house." I said nothing. "They say we're 2 months from foreclosure." Still nothing. "Evelyn, we can't make the payments without you." There it was. Not concern. Not regret. Money. Always money. She begged. Cried. Promised things would get better. Promised my father didn't mean what he said. Promised everyone was upset. I listened quietly. Then I told her the truth. If Lily isn't family to him, then neither am I. Her face crumpled. I opened the front door, and I asked her to leave. My mother stood outside my door for a long time. I could hear her crying through the wood. Soft at first, then harder, then quieter. But I didn't open it again. For years, that sound would have broken me. For years, I would have apologized for hurting her while forgetting she had watched my daughter get humiliated and said nothing. But that day, I let her cry. and I let the door stay closed. 2 weeks passed. Then Madison called. I let it go to voicemail. She called again. Then the texts began. At first, they sounded worried. Mom isn't eating. Dad is barely sleeping. They're scared. Then they became sharper. You're taking this too far. You're punishing them over one bad moment. One bad moment. That was what they called it now. Not a shove. Not cruelty. Not a grown man making a little girl feel unwanted in front of everyone. Just one bad moment. I didn't answer. I focused on Lily. We went to the park. We baked cookies. We watched her favorite old movies. But my daughter wasn't the same. She hesitated before speaking. She asked permission for things she'd never asked permission for before. Even at home, she seemed smaller, quieter, like she was trying not to take up too much space. That hurt worse than anything my father had ever said to me. By the 3rd week, I checked the joint account I used to pay my parents' mortgage. I had only logged in because I needed a statement for taxes. But there it was, overdue, 32 days late. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I logged out and made an appointment at the bank to remove my name from anything connected to them. That night, my father texted. Not called. Texted. I hope you're proud of yourself. Your mother and I are about to lose everything because of your little tantrum. Then came the line that almost made me laugh. You have no idea what it's like to be a parent. I looked across the room at Lily. She was sitting on the rug, brushing her doll's hair in silence. I typed one word back. Watch. After that, I blocked him. A few days later, Lily asked if we could stop going to Grandma and Grandpa's house forever. I told her yes. Her smile was small, but it was real. By the 4th week, my parents started selling things online. Furniture, tools, my old bicycle, a dining set my mother used to call a family heirloom whenever she wanted to impress people. Piece by piece, the house emptied. I watched the posts appear and disappear. I didn't feel happy, but I didn't feel guilty either. Then came the letter. It was taped to my front door. No envelope, no stamp, just folded paper in my father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. He always made his capital G like a backward 6. The message was short, angry, ugly. He said I had turned my back on my own blood. He said if I thought they were going down quietly, I was wrong. He said the world deserved to know what kind of daughter I really was. I read it once, then I burned it in the kitchen sink. A week later, they lost the house. I didn't hear it from them. A former neighbor texted me a photo of a moving truck in the driveway. Is everything okay? Your mom looked like she was crying. By afternoon, they were gone. No forwarding address. No apology. No call. Nothing. Still, a small part of me waited. That was the part of me they had trained. The part that believed silence meant I should reach out first. I didn't. 2 months passed before I learned where they had gone. An old coworker mentioned she had seen my father coming out of a corner store across town. He looked thinner, she said, unshaven, carrying job applications. The image stayed with me for days. My father, who used to brag that he would never work retail, now asking for work from people he once looked down on. The same man who said he would never hire anyone with gaps in their employment. Now he was the gap. Lily started forgetting little things about them. The sound of my mother's voice, the way their house smelled, the photo that used to sit over the fireplace. One afternoon, she asked if we still had that picture. I said no. Then she asked if they were still family. I looked at her carefully. No, I said. Not anymore. By then, we had started therapy. At first I thought Lily only needed help with the dinner incident. But the more she talked, the more I learned. My father had interrupted her every time she spoke. My mother rarely asked her questions. They told her to stay quiet when Madison's baby was sleeping. They praised her cousin for every sound, every smile, every tiny movement. Lily had learned to disappear in that house, and I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. One morning my mother emailed me. No greeting, no apology, no mention of Lily. Just a list. Rent, utilities, prescriptions, groceries. At the bottom she wrote, "Please. Your father won't ask, but I will." I didn't reply. That night, I sat Lily down and told her enough of the truth. Not everything, not the money, not the threats, but enough. I told her Some adults fail children. I told her, love should never make her feel small. She listened quietly. Then she asked, they don't love us, do they? I swallowed hard. No, I said. Not the way they should. She nodded. Then I'm glad we're not going back. 3 days later, my father showed up at my office. He walked straight into the lobby like he still had the right. The receptionist called me, confused. There's an older man here, insisting you'll want to see him. I knew who it was before she finished. Tell him no. He waited outside for over an hour. When I left, he was standing near the parking lot bench. He looked at me like he couldn't believe I would walk past him. But I did. The next day, I changed the locks at my house. They never had a key, but I wasn't taking chances anymore. Then something happened that turned my fear into something colder. Lily's school called. A man had come by asking to drop off a gift for her. He didn't give his name. He only said he was family. The office staff refused. They said something felt wrong. When they described him, I knew it was my father. The gift was wrapped in red paper. I told the school to throw it away. That night, I called a lawyer, because this wasn't about guilt anymore. It wasn't about money. It wasn't even about my parents losing their house. It was about protecting my daughter from people who thought blood gave them permission. The lawyer listened without interrupting. The dinner, the mortgage, the emails, the office visit, the school. When I finished, I expected her to tell me I was overreacting. She didn't. She said one word: harassment. Then she told me we had enough to file for a protective order. For the first time in months, I felt the ground steady beneath me. We filed the paperwork the next morning. The court date was set for the following Tuesday. And that same night, Madison emailed me again. The subject line said, "Don't punish them forever." I almost deleted it, but I opened it. She wrote that they were barely surviving. Dad was working nights, stocking shelves. Mom had taken a temp job at a check-cashing place. Their landlord had already threatened eviction. Then she wrote something I wasn't ready for. "You were always the golden child, Evelyn. They always expected you to save them." I sat there staring at that sentence. Golden child. I had never felt golden. I had felt useful, quiet, convenient. The daughter who didn't make trouble. The daughter who paid. The daughter who stayed. Maybe that was the truth. They didn't love me more. They just needed me more. And there is a difference. I didn't answer Madison's email. For 3 days, I ignored it. Then she showed up at my house. Lily was spending the afternoon at a friend's birthday party. When the knock came, I almost didn't answer, but something about it felt unfamiliar. Not my father's aggressive pounding, not my mother's hesitant tapping, just 3 slow knocks. When I opened the door, Madison looked older than I remembered. Not older by years, older by exhaustion. Her face was thinner. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. She was holding a worn grocery bag that looked like it had been reused 100 times. For a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered every family dinner where she sat silently, while Lily was ignored. I remembered her staring at her plate while my daughter sat on the floor. I remembered that silence had choices inside it. Madison asked if she could come in. I said no. She stood on the porch and shifted her weight. Then she finally told me why she'd come. "Dad knows about the court papers." I said nothing. "He's furious." Still nothing. "He says you're trying to destroy him." I stared at her. She swallowed. "He says if you testify, he'll make sure you regret it." For a moment, I almost laughed. My father had lost his house, lost his savings, lost his daughter. And somehow he still believed he was the one holding power. Madison waited for me to react, to argue, to defend myself, to ask questions. Instead, I just stood there. Eventually, she got angry. Maybe because silence is harder to fight than shouting. "You're turning into him, Evelyn." Her voice cracked. "You're cold now." I looked at her. "No." She frowned. "I'm finally seeing him clearly." Then I closed the door. 3 days later, I walked outside for work and found all 4 tires on my car slashed. The rubber hung in strips. The rim sat crooked against the pavement. I stood there staring. No note, no witnesses, no camera footage, nothing. I couldn't prove my father did it. But deep down, I knew. The timing was too perfect. The anger too familiar. That afternoon, I bought security cameras. I installed them myself. Every door, every window, every blind spot. The court date arrived the following Tuesday. I barely slept the night before. Not because I was afraid, because I was tired. Tired of defending boundaries that should never have needed defending. Tired of explaining why my daughter deserved basic respect. Tired of carrying responsibilities that never belonged to me. When I entered the courtroom, my mother was already there. Alone. My father wasn't. The chair beside her remained empty. She sat with both hands wrapped tightly around her purse. Her shoulders looked smaller than I remembered. She never looked at me. Not once. The judge reviewed everything. The dinner incident. The unwanted visits. The school contact. The threats. The lawyer presented the evidence calmly. My mother said nothing. When the judge granted the protective order, there was no dramatic outburst. No argument. No protest. My mother simply stood, picked up her purse, and walked out. That was it. Years of family history reduced to less than an hour. Lily never knew about the hearing. I wanted her childhood to contain at least one room untouched by their chaos. That weekend, we stood side by side brushing our teeth before bed. Suddenly, she wrapped her arms around me, the toothbrush still hanging from one hand. You know something? What? You're the safest place in the world. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I managed to smile. But later, after she fell asleep, I sat alone in the dark and cried. Not because I was sad, because I finally understood what mattered. Everything else could burn, as long as she felt safe. Weeks passed. Then, months. No calls. No surprise visits. No emails. Nothing. The silence felt strange at first. Then it felt peaceful. Lily started sleeping through the night again. Her teacher emailed me one afternoon. She said Lily was participating more in class, making friends, telling jokes. Apparently, she was funny. Really funny. The kind of funny children become when they stop being afraid. We celebrated with ice cream. A few weeks later, we drove to the beach. Just the two of us. On the way home, the sunset painted the highway gold. Lily stared out the window, then quietly said, "This is the happiest I've been in a really long time." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I didn't ask questions. I just let her have the moment. Then one Friday evening, a voicemail appeared from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. The message was only 4 words. My father's voice sounded rough. "Olda. Broken. I lost my job." That was all. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement of anything he'd done. Just 4 words dropped into my voicemail like an obligation. I deleted it. 2 days later, my mother called. This time, she left a longer message. Their landlord had posted an eviction notice. 2 weeks. That was all they had. She begged for one final payment, one final chance, one final rescue. She promised they weren't asking to come back into our lives. They just needed help. But I knew what she was really asking. Not money. Absolution. She wanted me to pretend the past never happened. To erase Lily's tears. To erase the shove. To erase every year they treated us like we mattered less. That night I pulled out an old photo box. Birthdays. Christmas mornings. Graduations. Family vacations. Smiling faces frozen in time. Evidence of a family I once believed existed. One by one, I tore the photos. I didn't rush. I didn't cry. I simply removed people who had already removed themselves. Lily found me halfway through. She looked at the trash bag, then at me. "What are you doing?" I smiled softly. "Making room for new memories." She thought about that, then nodded. "Good." I raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. I never liked that picture anyway. I laughed for the first time all day. A week later, an old neighbor sent me a message. She had seen my parents. They were living behind an auto repair shop several towns away, in a rusted trailer. No heat, barely any electricity. My father had apparently been screaming at someone in the parking lot. My mother looked thin, fragile, lost. I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide how I felt. The answer surprised me. I felt nothing. Not happiness. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Just distance. A few days later, a letter arrived. Real paper. Real handwriting. But this time, it wasn't from my father. It was from my mother. Inside was a single page. One sentence near the middle made my stomach tighten. "Your father is coughing blood. He refuses to see a doctor. I think he's dying. Please help. For the first time in months, uncertainty returned, and I hated it. I folded the letter carefully. Then I placed it inside a kitchen drawer. For a long time, I simply stood there staring at the handle. Your father is coughing blood. I think he's dying. The words followed me through the house. Into the shower. Into bed. Into the quiet moments between everything else. Not because I believed my mother deserved sympathy. Not because my father deserved forgiveness. But because some wounds leave behind echoes. And one of those echoes sounded a lot like guilt. The next morning, I made breakfast for Lily. Pancakes, shaped like stars. Her favorite. She talked about school, about a science project, about a girl in class who accidentally glued her sleeve to a desk. I smiled at all the right places, but my mind kept drifting. What if he dies? What if this is the end? Would I regret it? Would I wake up 10 years from now wishing I had done something? That question haunted me, because it was the exact question my parents had trained me to ask my entire life. Not what was fair, not what was healthy, not what was right, only what I owed. That weekend, I got into my car and drove. I didn't tell Lily where I was going. I barely admitted it to myself. But eventually, I found the auto repair shop. The trailer sat behind the building exactly as I'd been told. Rust along the sides. One small window, a faded folding chair outside. I parked across the street and waited. 15 minutes later, my mother stepped outside. For a moment, I barely recognized her. Her coat hung loose. Her hair was thinner. Her shoulders curved inward like she was trying to disappear. She sat in the folding chair and stared at nothing. Then the trailer door opened again. My father emerged. And suddenly, every fantasy I'd ever had about confronting him vanished. Because he already looked defeated. He was thinner than I'd ever seen him. His movements were slower, careful, like even standing required effort. Halfway across the small patch of dirt beside the trailer, he doubled over. A violent cough shook his entire body. Then another, and another. He stayed bent forward for several seconds, one hand braced against his knee, his whole frame trembling. My mother watched. Neither of them spoke. Eventually he straightened, wiped his mouth, and disappeared back inside. I sat there another minute. Then I started my car and drove away. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. Mostly, I felt tired, because seeing them like that confirmed something important. Even now, after everything, even at their lowest. They weren't reaching out because they loved us. They were reaching out because they needed something. The need had changed. The pattern hadn't. That night, I sat Lily down in the living room. She immediately knew something was wrong. Children always know. I told her the truth. Not every detail, just enough. I explained that Grandpa was very sick, that Grandma had written me a letter, that I didn't know what would happen next. Lily listened quietly. Then she asked the question I had been avoiding. Do we have to help them? The room felt very still. I looked at her, at the little girl who had spent months rebuilding herself from damage she never deserved, at the child who had learned she wasn't responsible for other people's cruelty, at the daughter who had become stronger than many adults I knew. So, instead of answering immediately, I asked her something. Do you want to? She didn't hesitate. She shook her head. No. There was no anger in her voice. No revenge. No hatred. Just honesty. And in that moment, everything became clear. Because protecting her wasn't just about keeping dangerous people away. It was about teaching her that love is not obligation. That family is not ownership. That sacrifice is not the price of acceptance. The next morning, I took my mother's letter. I slipped it back into an envelope. I added a yellow sticky note. Only 6 words. This is no longer my problem. Then I mailed it. 2 months passed. Life continued. School projects, soccer games, movie nights, quiet mornings. The ordinary things that suddenly felt extraordinary. Then Madison called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me this time would be different. Her voice sounded exhausted, flat, like someone who had run out of emotions. She told me my father had collapsed in a parking lot. An ambulance had taken him to a charity clinic 2 towns away. They still didn't know exactly what was wrong. No insurance, no money, no resources left. My mother had moved into a women's shelter. The trailer was gone. Everything they owned fit into a handful of bags. When Madison finished speaking, silence filled the line. She seemed to be waiting for sympathy, for questions, for something. Instead, I said quietly, "I hope they find the help they need." Then I hung up. That was the last update I ever received. Maybe my father recovered. Maybe he didn't. Maybe my mother rebuilt her life. Maybe she couldn't. I honestly don't know. And for the first time in my life, not knowing didn't feel like a responsibility. It felt like freedom. Several months later, Lily and I moved. Not because we had to, because we wanted to. A fresh start. A small house with white siding and blue shutters. No memories attached. No ghosts in the walls. No obligations hidden beneath the floorboards. The first thing we did was plant flowers. I let Lily choose every color. Purple, yellow, bright pink. A combination I never would have picked myself. But somehow it worked. Every afternoon, she'd run outside to check them, reporting new blooms, like breaking news. One evening, while we watered the garden together, she looked up at me and smiled. A real smile. The kind that reached her eyes. The kind I'd almost forgotten she had before all of this began. And suddenly, I realized something. The greatest loss in this story wasn't my parents. It wasn't the mortgage money. It wasn't the house they lost. The greatest loss would have been losing her. Losing her confidence, her laughter, her belief that she mattered. And we hadn't lost those things. We had saved them. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about my parents. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. Mostly with acceptance. They spent years teaching me that love meant sacrifice. That loyalty meant endurance. That being a daughter meant carrying burdens that were never mine. But Lily taught me something different. She taught me that real love protects. Real love respects. Real love doesn't demand that you destroy yourself to prove it exists. I've accepted that I no longer have parents. That truth hurts in quiet ways. There are moments when I miss who I thought they were. Moments when I remember old birthdays and Christmas mornings and wish things had been different. But wishes don't change reality. Reality is this. My daughter sleeps peacefully. She laughs loudly. She takes up space. She knows she matters. And so do I. I didn't choose revenge. I didn't choose cruelty. I didn't choose punishment. I chose peace. And after everything that happened, peace was worth more than any family I left behind.